Good morning. Hope you've enjoyed worship today. Today we are going to close out a series of teachings that have had the overarching title of Urgent. There are 4 different messages that contained messages from different authors in the New Testament that were in reality just short letters to a church or several congregations. And in those letters written to those churches and those congregations were messages of great urgency. I have to admit that I haven't quite figured Twitter out. I sometimes wonder what is the appeal of Twitter, but maybe someday I'll have a Twitter account. The same can be said for Facebook and Facebook statuses and all of that kind of thing. It's so easy to communicate now with our world that within seconds we can let hundreds and sometimes perhaps even thousands of people know exactly what we're thinking. Or if we don't have anything profound to say or aren't thinking deep thoughts, we can let people know what we had for breakfast. We can even take a photograph of it and post it online so people can see a picture of the food that we are about to consume. Communication is fast and easy these days. It's one of the perks of living in the 21st century. I don't have a Facebook account, but maybe someday that'll happen too. But it wasn't like that in the first century when the New Testament was being written. The process of communication was much different. And even the simple act of sending a letter was complicated. There was no postal service, so if you wanted to send a letter from one place to another, first of all, you had to find someone who was going to that particular city. Then you had to talk them into taking your letter with them and tell them how to find the letter's recipient and hope that they would follow through. Because of that, letters that were sent tended to be very, very long, much longer than the typical tweet, which I understand is only 140 characters, or a Vine video that's 6 seconds long. If you're going to that much trouble to get a letter delivered, you took some time writing it, and your letter would likely be the equivalent of several pages. You see this in the New Testament letters that Paul wrote to the church in Rome and the church in Corinth. They're quite lengthy. Other New Testament letters, though not as long, are very detailed, and they cover many different topics in each letter. Since the process of sending a letter was somewhat complicated, when someone went to this kind of trouble just to send a very short letter, you knew that the letter was very important. You knew it wasn't just about what somebody had for breakfast. A one-page letter was considered urgent. And that's why it's interesting in the New Testament that there are 4 of those kinds of one-page letters consisting of just a few paragraphs, really covering less than a page. 2 of those letters were written by John, and 1 was written by Paul, and 1 was written by Jude. Each of those letters address urgent topics, things that needed to be dealt with and resolved quickly, things that couldn't wait until the author had time to write out a detailed dissertation. These were urgent matters, and these letters reveal to us 4 qualities that can't wait, 4 qualities that every believer needs to develop in his or her personal life. They need to be developed ASAP. I mean, like yesterday. This was urgent stuff, and it's urgent stuff for us today as well. Today we're going to look at the letter that we call the book of 2 John. It's written by John the Apostle, the same one who wrote the Gospel of John. It was written to the chosen lady and to her children. And most scholars agree that this is referring to a church and its members, or maybe a group of house churches. What I'm saying is that this is an open letter written to a group of churches or a body of believers, so when we read it, again, just like with the other letters that we've covered in this series, we can read it as if John were writing that letter to us today. It's a short letter, so let's read it from beginning to end right now. 2 John, the elder, to the chosen lady and her children, whom I love in the truth. And not I only, but also all who know the truth, because of the truth which lives in us and will be with us forever. Grace and mercy and peace from God the Father and from Jesus Christ, the Father's Son, who will be with us in truth and love. It has given me great joy to find some of your children walking in the truth, just as the Father commanded us. And now, dear lady, I'm not writing you a new command, but one we have had from the beginning. I ask that we love one another. And this is love, that we walk in obedience to His commands. As you've heard from the beginning, His command is that you walk in love. Many deceivers who do not acknowledge Jesus Christ as coming in the flesh have gone out into the world. Any such person is the deceiver and the Antichrist. Watch out that you do not lose what you have worked for, but that you may be rewarded fully. Anyone who runs ahead and doesn't continue in the teaching of Christ doesn't have God. And whoever continues in the teaching of Christ does not have the Son. Whoever continues in the teaching has both the Father and the Son. If anyone comes to you and does not bring this teaching, do not take him into your house and do not welcome him. Anyone who welcomes him shares in his wicked work. I have much to write to you, but I don't want to use paper and ink. Instead, I hope to visit you and talk with you face to face, so that our joy may be complete. The children of your sister, who is chosen by God, they send their greetings. Well, there are three very brief things I want us to learn from this short letter that John has written to this church or this group of house churches. And the first one is simply this: love is the anchor of our faith. Love is the anchor of your faith and of my faith and of the faith of the believers that are gathered in this church and the church next door and the church across town. So here's the urgent message of 2 John. Which quality is he talking about here that cannot wait? It is very simply this topic of love. This is the first thing I want us to notice in John's words today. More than anything else, the Christian life has to be a life of love. We sometimes try to make it about other things, and when we do, we run ahead, as John mentions in verse number 9. And when we abandon the fundamental doctrine of love, we do not continue in the teaching of Christ, like John wrote in verse number 9. Love is the anchor. Love is the hinge pin, the pivotal point of being a believer. And Jesus himself made it very clear when he was asked, what is the greatest commandment? And Jesus answered with a quote from the book of Deuteronomy. He said in Matthew 22, verses 37 and 38, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the first and the greatest commandment. And then he went on to say in Matthew 22, verse 39, and the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. And then he sums it all up in Matthew chapter 22, verse number 40. All the law and the prophets hang on these two commandments. In other words, what Jesus was saying in answering this question that was given to him is this: do you want a summary of the Christian life? It's very simple. Here it is. It's love God, love others, and love yourself. Jesus said again in John 13:35, by this all men will know that you are my disciples, if you love one another. He didn't talk about people knowing if they were disciples because of the amount of money that they gave to the church, the amount of work they did in the church, the numbers of boards or committees they served on, or how faithful they were in attendance. He goes straight to the heart of the matter of the Christian life, and he says, by this will all men know that you're my disciples, if you love one another. So this morning, if you've been toying with any equation of spirituality that doesn't begin and end with the doctrine of love, then you've missed the mark. Because Christianity is first and last, it's really about love. That's why John said in 2 John verse number 5, and now, dear lady, I'm not writing you a new command, but one that we've had from the beginning. I ask that we love one another. Love is fundamental. It's supreme. It is the gospel of Jesus Christ in a word. That's the first thing that we see in this short letter that was written by John. But secondarily, next we see love and obedience go together. They're partners. 2 John verse number 6 says this, and this is love, that we walk in obedience to his commands. Obedience is one of those heavy words, and for some of us this morning, it's kind of an intimidating word because often we associate the word obedience with certain behaviors, things we aren't supposed to do, or maybe things that we are supposed to do. So walking in obedience is often interpreted as doing this or not doing that. Sometimes walking in obedience is tantamount to us having a checklist of things that we're supposed to accomplish, things that we're supposed to do for the Lord, and things that we dare not do or think. Obedience is not just walking a straight line. More importantly, John says obedience is how you treat others. Listen to his words. We find them again in 2 John verse number 6. And this is love, that we walk in obedience to his commands. As you have heard from the beginning, his command is that you walk in love. A lot of Christians get that wrong. We tend to think that holiness and obedience is all about that checklist of do's and don'ts. We get obsessed with grading ourselves, and it becomes all about me and how I'm doing and whether or not I'm making a passing grade. And the rest of the world and the needs of the rest of the world, they kind of get put on the back burner. Because what really matters more than anything else, at the end of the day, is that we've accomplished what's on the checklist. That we've made sure we didn't do the things we weren't supposed to do, and that we did the things that we were supposed to do. But real obedience to God, It goes much deeper than the do's and the don'ts. You see, real obedience moves into the selfless love of others. People like you. And people like the guy or the girl sitting next to you, or the man or the woman in front of you or behind you. Love and obedience, they always go hand in hand. It's never either or. It is always both and. The third thing I want us to see this morning maybe is the most important thing. If you get the first two correct, this one becomes pure joy. Love up close is always better than love at a distance. John said in verse number 12, I have a lot to write to you, but I don't want to use paper and ink. Instead, I hope to visit you and talk with you face to face. Why? So that our joy may be complete. In the closing of that short letter, John is emphasizing the personal nature of the Christian life. It's so much more than pen and ink. It's so much better face to face. And that's why you're watching this teaching on multimedia this morning. A part of our church family, including two of your pastors, have been in Haiti for 7 days working with the Haitian people, helping with their medical needs, building and painting and teaching and discipling young men, and pouring the love of Jesus out to people who will probably never see us again, and we will never see them this side of heaven. Love compelled us to go, because love close up is always better than love at a distance. The people of Haiti know our love for them, not just because they read about it and not just because they heard about it, but because a team from the church at Bradenton, your church, took the time, some of them perhaps vacation time or time without pay, to come alongside them and place an arm around their shoulder and share the love of God with them. They know about the love of Jesus today because there's a church in Bradenton, Florida, who helped fund this missional encounter with them because the love of God compelled them to give. The road to life change, it really is not traveled by way of books and tapes and podcasts and television preachers, even the good ones. But the most powerful moments in the Christian life happen face to face. People need other people with skin on them. Just like I said a couple of weeks ago, people need other people with skin on them to help them discover hope and walk this journey of faith with God. I've had incredible worship experiences in time spent alone with God. But the greatest worship experiences I've ever had have been in the presence of others. And some of the most significant learning experiences I've had, the kind of learning experiences that are less about increasing knowledge and more about creating life change, have happened in the presence of others. That's the power of community. In fact, we're so convinced of the power of community that it's one of the core values here at the church at Bradenton. We believe life change happens best in community and in the presence of others. John was saying in this letter that he wants to do more than just send words on a page. He wants us to do more than just write a check to support a cause. He wants us to do more than just thinking kind thoughts. He said, I want to see you face to face. Why? Because when I'm in your presence, our joy will be complete. Today, thanks to technology, we can communicate with people around the world instantly and virtually without cost, just like you're experiencing right now. It's almost the same as being there. But it's not completely the same, because technology will never take the place of being with someone face to face. We were made for community. We were made for personal contact with one another. And God isn't looking for a bunch of people or individuals who love Him and serve Him merely as separate entities. He wants those individuals to love Him and serve Him by loving one another and serving one another. It's our most fundamental belief. According to John, it's one of our highest commands. As John said in a previous letter, 1 John chapter 4, verses 7 and 8. Dear friends, let us love one another, for love comes from God. And everyone who loves has been born of God and knows God. And whoever does not love does not know God, because God is love. Did you hear that? Whoever does not love does not know God, because God is love. That's why John's letter is so urgent, because his command is that you walk in love. And I want to give you my thought on that. He's saying, put some shoe leather on your love that you talk about so much and go out and change the world. Why? Because you love them, and because God has said the greatest way that we imitate Him is to love one another. It's urgent. It's urgent that we love one another. And the foundation of our love is the gospel of Jesus Christ. And that gospel message is found in John 3:16. For God so loved the world that He gave His only Son, that whosoever would believe in Him should not perish but have everlasting life. The gospel, in a word, is love. There are people who'll try to make it about politics or financial prosperity or the cultural wars and marches and protests, and they distort the message of Jesus to suit their own agenda, and they justify hate and intolerance and greed and all manner of ungodliness. Instead, we need to proclaim the original biblical gospel message that Jesus Christ came into the world to save us from our sins and to give us a new life in Him. And He called us not only to live in love, but to take His message of love and a new life to a very lost, dark, hurting, and dying world. Let us love one another. Well, how do you put that into practice? Well, maybe you're here today, and the truth be told, you haven't really been walking in love toward others. Maybe you're living on the edge, and living in that place is causing you so much stress and anxiety that you're just not loving toward others. Maybe you're harboring a grudge, something in your heart that you need to share. Maybe there's somebody you need to be more Christ-like toward. Maybe you're here, and in all honesty, you aren't receiving love from others. Life's kind of lonely for you during this season of life. And you look around and you see other people that seem to be in these vital, loving relationships, and your heart aches because you want that kind of relationship as well. Maybe you're here and you know it's coming. The holidays are just around the corner. And what you know is that you're in a lonely time of life because you've lost a loved one. We invite you this morning, wherever you find yourself, whether you need to walk in love toward others more effectively, whether you're in that lonely stage of life, or maybe you're feeling totally unloved at all, we invite you to come and pray this morning. John makes it very clear that the hinge pin, again, the pivotal point in the Christian life is that we live a life of love toward one another. So let us love one another this morning. And then let's leave this place and go out, as I encourage you, I think, almost every week, to go out and be change agents in the world. We're the only Jesus that some people are going to see. And John exhorts us. He begs us. It's an urgent matter. You and I are called to be the agents of love in this world that sometimes feels so unloved. This morning, the worship team is going to come and lead us in an opportunity for you to respond. And I invite you, wherever you're standing this morning, I invite you to step out from where you are and come to an altar and pray that God would make you more like Him. And remember, God is love. And again, if you're in a place this morning that's not a good place, and you're feeling lonely, and perhaps you're feeling a little pushed aside or maybe a little unloved, I invite you to come and pour your heart out to the Lord and say, God, this is where I am. Send somebody my way that'll put an arm around my shoulder, and I can sense the love of Jesus in them. Let's pray together. God, this morning I pray for the people that are gathered in this place. I pray for the people that are gathered in the church in Haiti. I pray for the team that is there even now. And I pray, God, that wherever you find us, whether the church at Bradenton, a church in Haiti, or the team that's on foreign soil spreading the love of God, I pray that you would encourage us to understand what John is saying to us. This matter of loving other people, walking in love, is an urgent matter. The world has all kinds of things, Lord, that they think about us. Some of them are good, and some of them are probably not. But God, about this church, the church at Bradenton, I pray that what the community of Bradenton would be able to say about us is the same thing that people said about the early church. See how they love one another. And that we would understand, by this shall all men know that you are my disciples, the words of Jesus, because you love one another. Worship team, come and lead us. And church, if the Lord has spoken to your heart this morning, you come as well. If you want to pray alone, one of the altars over on your left. You come and spend as much time as you'd like. And if you want someone to pray with you, one of the altars over on your right. Bring somebody with you, or someone from our prayer teams will come and they'll pray with you this morning. But don't leave until you've settled this urgent issue of love and your Christian walk this morning.